Hello and welcome to Camera Reviews. I have a beast of a book, an amazing book, an inspired book, and it hasn't got the original cover on, which I put the cover away because I was using the book itself to show somebody and it's been somewhere else, and I wanted to protect the cover. My knowledge of Magnum is that when you went to apply for a membership there, in the old days, I'm not so much sure in the world of digital, but you'd have to show your contact sheets. You'd have to show your contact sheets to the members, and they would be able to understand how you saw your subject, how you worked with your subject, how you evolved taking pictures. It was a great idea. It was an interesting way of doing it, because the contact sheets used to say a lot about a photographer. And interestingly, because I shot on black and white most of my life, I think I was always associating frames within a film roll to when I got a shot. And I think 13 and 36 were my two numbers. I seemed to get the shots, if I was concentrating on one subject, would be towards the end of the roll, and roughly 13 was a sort of frame which for me was a frame where I'd score a sort of good shot every now and then. So I don't know what the science is in that, but it's interesting. But it is a really good format to believe in, that the contact sheet is a sort of way of understanding how a photographer works. And it's so lost in today's digital age, and I'm a believer on and printing out contact sheets still, even with digital, and treating it in batches of 36, the way which the way we still do film development in batches of 36 frames. Anyway, I want to have a quick look through this. I want to inspire you to go and buy this. It's available. It's not cheap, but it's worth it. I paid for this about £100 in Waterstones. I think it's either cheaper or dearer now, I'm not really sure. This was when it first came out, and it's very heavy. I didn't buy it at first because I couldn't carry it out of the Waterstones, and I went back and I bought it straight away, and rushed back when I had the chance and bought it. So I want to give you an insight into it. I am lucky to have worked with some of these photographers in here over the years, and I've had an amazing insight into their lives, their contact sheets. I was in around the Magnum archive for a few years, so I got to see a lot of this stuff firsthand. Anyway, let's have a little look through it. Anyway, let's measure it. It is 11.5 by just under 14 inches, and it's about 2.5 inches thick with, I mean, it's worth it's money. There's 508 pages in here. So it's pretty good. I can't actually fit it onto my rostrum area, but I'm going to try. So I'm going to just go. I'm going to just go where my finger takes me, and I'm not going to show you it all because I don't want to spoil that, and I don't want to interfere with the selling of this. But I want you to be inspired by this, and as I was, and as many other people have been. Anyway, Magnum contact sheets, edited by Kristen, Lubben, with 435 illustrations and 230 in colour, published by Thames and Hudson. First published in 2011. Okay, so here's a list of introduction and by decade, roughly, is it by decade? Yeah, roughly. It starts off from 30s to 49, and then the decades of the development of the contact sheets. And there's a lot. I think it's this Bresson opposite. I know we look at the contact sheets in the Magnum office, 1959. Let's just go quick through the work of Magnum photographers. This volume traces development and the demise of the way of working that was so ubiquitous as seemed to be inevitable and inextricable part of the process of photographing. The use of the contact sheet as a record of one's shooting, a tool for editing, and an index to an archive of negatives. Yeah. And the contact sheet was done by placing the negatives onto a photosensitive paper and exposing that to light, and then printing that out, and then you'd have the index an index version of what you just shot. So my spelling I may have got a few pronunciations wrong, I'm sorry. I remember this from the London office. I remember all these files and paper boxes. I remember being in Philip Jones Griffiths' office in London and in New York and looking at boxes and boxes and boxes of neg files and contact sheets, and all meticulously kept and looked after. So I'm going to go through a few. We've got Bresson 33, and looking at the shots he took in a day. This is why this is beautiful. It's such an insight into how Bresson sort of conceived a shot and where, you know, and how where he saw it. George Roger, who I'm so privileged to have met not long before he died, sadly, in the 90s. Well, I had a chance to meet George through Peter Marlowe and spent a day with him talking about the work and helping him with his edits for his book. It was just such an honour to be around such a man. In 1940, the Blitz, George Roger. That's the contract. She said, that's something you sort of don't, you're not used to this. If you're a photographer and you've been into black and white, as I have, you understand this, and this has been part of my life. And honestly, if you're 19 now, or in your 20s, and you're a photographer, you should buy this. You should, and it'll inspire you to get into a dark room and take pictures. Robert Capa, Leipzig. Well, this is 45. Going, the Second World War was near a close. German defeat was imminent, and the Allies were almost ready to declare victory. Capa joined the 1st Army 2nd Infantry Division as it fought its way through the western outskirts of Leipzig. It does show, you know, when you look at this, that's a really famous shot by Mark Ribot. It does show that there is a lot of stuff which is just sizing up the shot, sizing up and looking and working. And that's such an amazing insight into that really, really famous, iconic shot. And then you'd see where he's playing and testing it and experimenting. And that must be the guy. How amazing is that? 1953. Let's go on to 60. That's the Beatles, I think. I'm not even going to tell you who that is. I want you to go and buy it. This looks like some, what's this? Rennieberry Ministry of Health. Yeah. There's the contact sheets, and is that an alternative? Oh, they're the two shots. The movement. Oh, get it, the passing and the looking of the woman, yeah. I am not reading much into this. I don't want to give too much away. So using, this is what we call E6, what we call transparency. And your transparencies are kept in a sheet, and this is taken from the plastic sheet where they're held. So it's roughly, you would pack these up in plastic or paper mounts as they would come out of the roll. So effectively, it's like a colour contact sheet before we started doing it with neg, colour neg. I know Ian Berry used to work with a lot of colour neg. Looks like, yeah, there we go. René Berry's. I met René in Paris a long time ago, and he's such a lovely man. And he was in the Paris office at Magnum, and I was out with somebody shooting a job, and we were in there for an afternoon, and I met René. It was wonderful. I think I just read his. I just bought his book on the sea, the fisherman, which was massive at the time. It's really good. I've got that somewhere. We'll get that out and have a look at that. Look at that. Let's see who we come up next. Oh my God, that's horrible. And Scania, the dog on the gnat. Look at that. And that was 1972. Chris Perkins. I briefly assisted Chris once, many years ago. One day, you probably won't remember. That's a really famous shot. And you can see, you know, photographers have the exposure faults as well. You know, maybe the flash didn't go off, or maybe you moved the button by mistake. Who knows? You know, we do make mistakes, and the contact sheet is a great way of seeing how you explored that and how you persisted in that. But I think that's the flash hasn't gone off there, and then boom, it hasn't gone off, because that's the light looks a bit more intense, but that could be the development, and it hasn't gone off there at all. So, and that's the light, so it's the same shot. So 2 of the flash guns didn't go off there. So it's interesting. It happens all the time, and I guess that's that's probably on about 125th of a second, so it's not going to pick up much ambient light. So when the flash doesn't go off, you're going to get that ambient light. You're not going to get any ambient light. But there's a secret of shooting in that, and a lot of press photographers use. But I'm not going to tell you what that secret is. Great. Look at them. Such a great shot. Richard Calver. Oh yeah, this shot here. That's such a famous shot. I went to cover the funeral of Pope, or the first election of successor. Immediately fell in love with it. Okay, so this is his travels around Rome. Look at that. Immortalised for that look. I wonder where and what he's doing now. What was it? He's probably still alive. He's probably looking at going, was that me? But you know, amazing capture of that moment. The link of the way this works together with the faces. It's not just that. It's this whole movement, split down the side, right down the middle. Effectively, is the movement of faces. What a beautiful, well executed, great depth of field shot. I want to give this Peter Marlowe. What a classic Peter. Look at that. Peter's photography was just like a work of art anyway, and you can see the focus. Peter's clever, because I bet he shot it like this, knowing his contact sheet would be scrutinised. And look at he'd have picked that one. Well, obviously the eyes are closed, but he'd have picked that one because it worked in the design concept. He's a shrewd customer, Peter, but I bet he shot that knowing it was going to look like that. I bet that was just like, I bet he looked at that and was like, yeah, without even looking at that great shot. That's Skim. Ian Berry, yeah, let's have a look at Ian's. One of my favourite Magnum photographers. So this is 1985, apartheid funeral. Ian can get up close, man. He's so amazing at just getting right up close to things without even knowing he's around. And I worked with him for a long time, and I didn't even know he's around. He's that good at when he's working and shooting. He's so fluid in what he does. Transvaal, South Africa, anyway. I'm not going to put that up. Let's find another. Look at this. Oh, isn't that beautiful, man? Look at that. This book's worth every penny. It's just, I'm not bothered about saying the picture's big. It's just the romance of the contact, and it's something which students miss out on so much. And yeah, I mean, students do a lot of stuff with black and white in university and things, but you need to spend a few years in a dark room. I spent 10 years in the dark listening to Test Math Special, and you know, it's like, I've got this is my, you know, I've got my black and whites here, you know, and my love of being in the dark room and all of this, you know, it's just like it's an incredible process, and I'm sorry to throw that in. I wanted you to understand it's a passion which I have, which is about black and white, and I live by it and still do it, and have done it and spent a long time. And you know, I've been surrounded by some amazing printers. Glenn Brent, who was the Magnum printer for a long time, probably the two printers who I've known, probably for me is like one of the best printers I've ever seen. And it's just watching Glenn work in Magnum, and then later at his own dark room. It was just incredible experience. Bruce Gilden, Yakuza, 1998. Look at this. It's this. Right, we're going on to 2000 and the 2000s, the zeros. Oh, look at that. Christopher Anderson, Haitian immigrants. Amazing. Just to be out there getting that and coming back, and again there's mistakes, but that's the nature of the beast, when you're experimenting in your shooting process. Well, that's that one there. It's number 13, weirdly. As I said before, 13 was mine. You can see it's a sort of mid-range area when you're discussing. Sorry, not when you're discussing. When you're searching for images, and you're exploring with your shot, and you have to. You can't just. You've got to be trying every angle, every way, and I think that must be a flash or something, or a light which is coming by, or there might be a light which is coming off somebody which is interfering with the exposure. I can't really see clear. I'll have a look on the big one. But Christopher's explored this. He's exploring the composition. He knows there's something here. He knows there's something there. And he gets it here, right? And he continues. And it's interesting that his next exposure is wrong for whatever reason. And it's so very different. And you can see there's a build up to that moment. That's what we call the decisive moment, where and when to take the picture and press that shutter speed. But in a sense, he's dictated when he presses it, because he's explored that whole process to get to there. Well, that's why Christopher's there, because Christopher knows what he's looking for, and he's exploring with his eye through the camera, and he knows when that's going to happen. And that's the art of photography, and where you stand, of course, and where you position yourself, and where you stand in other ways. It's a very complex issue. Anyway, let's look at the big shot. That's what I think was probably the problem with the shot. That light may have been effective in that. I'll tell you something though. Let's just have a look at the film. I can't. Oh, it's T-Max. Well, I presume that's 400, and I'll tell you what, T-Max, Kodak T-Max, it's got the grain on it. It's got a little grain, but I thought it was a 3200, but it's not. But pushing T-Max, he must have pushed this well high, just because you can see the grain. And T-Max was fantastic. I shot my stuff on T-Max or Tri-X-Pan, amazing stuff, and so is Ilford HP5 as well. But I think at around the 2000, I think Ilford were out of business, but now they're back, and you should try it. Jonas Bendixson. And he's come across it, he's found it, he's come across it, he's exploring it, and then things start happening. So whether that's on the same time there period or whatever, because there just seems to be a flurry of snow or whatever, I'm not really sure what that is. He talks about it here. And there's a moment in time he was able to capture, which is incredible. That could be a sort of set of wind which brought, I don't know what it is, it's some foliage or feathers or something. I mean, I would need to do it, but it's just caught that moment in time. Let's go on to, let's find something else. Oh yeah, this is a really controversial shot. I've discussed this with students a lot, this shot, and when we look at contextual references within shots and how, and obviously what's going on there in September the 11th, and how this group of people are interacting with this horrific incident which is going on there, and how they seem perplexed and how they don't care. Sorry, not perplexed, but how they seem just so into that own company, avoiding this. But photography is a moment in time. That could have been a ponder of thought to what's going on there. It caught a moment which they were aware. Obviously, they're going to be focused on this, but it was a was something which they were just discussing, which made them look as they're not interested, blah blah blah. But they have a leisurely pause about it, and it's almost sort of like summer break pause. But hindsight's a real powerful tool, you know. And photography, you've got to be careful with it. And I'm not saying, you know, what went on here was with Thomas's work was anything bad at all. I just think he caught a moment, and I can't see these close up, but I'll tell you, right, there's 3 shots of it. This shot here, the guy who's in the far right is looking. They were looking over there. They're contemplating it. They're probably discussing it, because I bet at the time they didn't know much about what that was going on. Obviously it's pretty bad, but they hadn't understood what was happening to the full extent. So this is a really interesting picture to, if you've got students and stuff and you want to discuss meaning and context and how to be subjective and objective about imagery. This is a really good picture to sort of get them to discuss. You know, it's a superb shot, superb. I'm coming to the end. I've shown you about 10 things, and if that, you think that's a lot, there's 470 odd pages I've not 470 odd pages I've missed out. So 10 pages, there's about 470 pages I've missed out. One of my other favourite photographers, I love the way he sees the world, I love his work, and Mark's somebody, he doesn't know, but Mark is somebody who amongst with a few other Magnum photographers, Mark is somebody whose work I show a lot to students. He's I've got, crikey, how many students over the last 4 or 5 years have I put into university? Maybe 20, 30. No, I've done more than that. Anyway, I put quite a lot of students through to university to photography degrees, who are now first, second and third year students, and a lot of them started off by looking at Mark Power's work when they were starting the landscape photography, when they were looking at how to find a sort of contextual meaning within a project and understand the development of a project and look at it. And the same way I do it with Simon Roberts as well. And I show them like the landscape work, and there's so much going on with meaning and context from with lighting and all sorts of stuff. I'm waffling a little bit because I'm meaning the same thing and I'm repeating the same thing, but you get me drift. Mark's one of them photographers I show to students a lot, especially as well because he's English, and a lot of the stuff he's doing, which I think was really interesting, was British based, and that's really meaningful from a student who comes from a little town, and it gives them that sort of sense that you can shoot on your own doorstep and get out there. Anyway, these are 5.4, I think. Yeah, they look like 5.4. They could be 10.8 to be honest, but I presume Mark's got them on 5.4. Quality's amazing. This sort of, yeah, I was going to say this shot deserves a massive splash, and if you see this, it's beautiful. You know, you can't, that's just quality, and that's when a 5.4 is at its best. And to be honest, I think that's probably, that, you know, that's not the perspective of the size of the neg, but it's roughly like an A5, I think, something like that. I think that's the size, isn't it? But an A5 or something like that, you can only really appreciate it when it's big. That's fantastic. Anyway, I've waffled on. I hope you didn't mind. I think and hope that I've given you some insight into an amazing book with some amazing photography. And also what's more important is the sort of journey of a photographer trying to capture an image. And that's what this book lends itself to. It's not just a picture book. And I think they should do another one. And I hope they don't mind me trying to publicise it, trying to review it. I think I bought it. I think you should. And you've got to have some muscles to lift it. But if you know somebody who's a photographer and you want to buy them a really, really, really good birthday present, get them this. Absolutely worthwhile. And I think you got my shoe in the shot, but it matched the colour of the thing. I'm lying on the floor. Anyway, Thank you.